Welcome to the Fill Your Cups podcast, guys. This is our bonus book club episode. Last month, or I guess this month, we read The Women by Kristen Hanna. I know Morgan had read a Kristen Hanna book before, but this one was my first, and I really, really liked it. It was a really good book choice. It was our book club girl, Haley. It was her choice this month. And whenever she selected The Women, I told her I was really excited because Kristen Hanna has been on my bookshelf for like my want to read for so long now. But I haven't ever read any Kristen Hanna because I'm too intimidated by it. I'm like,
She has long books.
Yeah,
for sure.
they're so long. And I just always feel like when I'm going for a book I want to read, I go for like the short and sweets. Like I'm like 320 pages. That's kind of my max.
Yeah.
And she's like a 600 page girl.
Yeah, I feel like 500 to 600.
Yeah, 5 to 6. That's
Yeah.
true. I always feel really intimidated by her books, though, because I know people always say, like, oh, my God, I cried so much during this one. Or, like, they are war novels and things like that. But with all that being said, I was so happy that she selected this book because, I mean, I had to read it. And I loved it.
Yeah, it was really good. I loved it, gave it 5 stars. Like, I know our book club loved it a lot.
Yeah.
I've read 3 other books by her.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and historical fiction really is her genre, and it's not something I was ever interested in. Like, not something I would have...
Kristen Hanna.
Yeah, not something I would have picked up myself, I guess, but one of my coworkers had recommended another book, The Nightingale by her, and it was really hard to read, but really moving. I'm pretty sure I also gave it 5 stars. And yeah, historical fiction is just really her sweet spot, and I know that because I also read an older book by her that was more of a romance, and it was not as good. Like,
really?
I didn't like it as much. So I was really glad. The Women was new this year. I think it came out January of 24.
Yeah.
Is what we found out in book club.
There was a debate about that.
Yeah, there was. And so it came out this year. So it was one of her newer ones, but it was her like classic historical fiction. Super duper good. Loved it.
So good. I really liked that it was about the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
Because I do feel like that's a war that everyone knows about. Like, if you were to ask me what war I knew the most about, it'd probably be that one. Because with the other ones, I'm like, I don't really totally know what happened. It feels too historical. But the Vietnam War feels closer to home.
Dude, I feel so differently.
Really?
Yeah, I feel like I learned so much about, like, the Civil War and the, like, World War I and World War II and, like, all of those.
I do feel like those wars were taught in school.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. I wasn't a good student, though. So I feel like for Vietnam, that was in the movies and things like that. So I feel like that's why.
What movies?
Like Forrest Gump.
Oh, I guess that's fair.
The Notebook.
That's the war in the Notebook?
The Vietnam War.
Oh my gosh, I had no idea.
So, I mean, he was not
had to have been
old enough to be World War II.
I don't know. I guess I just don't pay attention to which war it is in the movies. So to me, I'm like, I don't know what war that is. That's not relatable. But I felt like I wasn't very privy to all of the, I guess, what's it called? It starts with a P. Propaganda that the U.S. had during the Vietnam War. Like, I did not know about this stuff. Even Agent Orange, I've heard of that and knew that it kind of came from the war, but I could never really remember, was that the Vietnam War? Like, I had no idea.
Yeah.
And so I just don't think that I had it. It didn't have a secure spot in my memory like some of the other ones did.
Yeah.
And I think especially because it wasn't mainly America, was it? I think it kind of was.
Yeah, it was us fighting in Vietnam.
Because it was kind of, wasn't the whole idea like, oh, we need to go there almost proactively to stop communism.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, it was Vietnam that was targeted. Obviously, the book was not a history lesson because I still don't know all of the details, but it was more, about the characters and like showing how that war impacted them before, during, and after going.
Yeah. I will say, like, I didn't know specifics about it or anything like that. I feel like I just knew
of it
more. Yeah, like I just thought of the Vietnam War more than I would think of other wars. Not that I think of wars, but like if I was to, I feel like that's like the first one that would come to mind.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. But
that's fair. I mean,
yeah. All that to say that even though I knew more of that one, I there was so many details, and I've just never thought about how it actually would have been for the veterans.
Yeah.
Which is insane because our papa is literally a medic veteran.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't like to talk about it. So I didn't really know any personal accounts from it, I guess.
Yeah.
I knew like how it would have looked because of Forrest Gump kind of thing.
Right.
But I really, really, really liked that. I remember being like halfway through the book, and I think that she was still in the Vietnam War. She was still on her tour. Mm-hmm. And I remember texting mom and being like, oh my gosh, like I was so blissfully ignorant about this war. Like there's just so many things I don't know, and so many like things that I wouldn't have thought about. I wouldn't think about them actually seeing people actually blown to bits. Like literally head open, stomach, guts out. I mean, who thinks about that willingly?
Yeah.
But I just thought that was a real eye opener for me, and I was like, wow, people actually had to do that. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was really hard. We talked a little bit in book club about being more drawn to the first half, which was her actually being in war, or the second half when she returned and experiencing kind of what veterans go through when they return, and especially the female ones.
Yeah.
But I can't remember, what did you say that you were more drawn to?
I said I was more drawn to the first half of the book, so the part where she's in Vietnam. But I think it's just because for the story itself, that's where a lot of the action, and it tells the war stories, and it tells like how it was on their days off. I felt like the second half was a lot more emotionally charged.
Oh yeah.
Because
and you didn't like that?
I liked it, but I just think that for the story, if I had to break it up into the one I liked the best, I liked the first half just because that's where all the action was.
I was more drawn to the first half too.
Where are you? I'm surprised about that.
Yeah, but it was mostly because I was so, I don't know. I felt like I got a glimpse into something that I never would have otherwise.
Yeah.
Like the veteran part of it, I can't really relate to that, or I don't have those own experiences.
Yeah.
Whereas the second half, even though, I mean, coming back and having PTSD after war is not necessarily something that I can relate to. It's something I've heard a lot more about.
Yeah.
And it's something, like, I can relate to anxiety and overwhelm and that sort of thing. I can't really relate to seeing people dying in front of me in masses. And then also just, like, the different things that happened that were very complicated overseas. And so I think that it was just the fact that it was new for me was so enlightening. But it was still, like, the second half was super enlightening too. And it was a lot more emotionally charged. Like, I remember being so upset, and like I would pick up the book and I'd be like, I don't want to read this, but I do want to read this. And I would be like, oh, and I seriously would have to, like, sometimes, like, shut it really hard.
Put it down.
And be like, oh my gosh. Like, and one of the characters, Rye, was just so fucking unbelievably selfish.
And cowardly. I just felt like that was him. I was like, you're just a coward. I felt pity for him.
Yeah, it just made me so upset.
Yeah.
And every time that something new would come up with him, I'd be like, are you? Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Like, so, yeah, I think that she just did such a beautiful job of following one single character, Frankie, through the process. And then also on the way back, showing just kind of the nuances of what it means to fall in love with someone who could die and at some point you think did. And and then the nuances of learning that they didn't admit to who they actually were.
Yeah.
And just all of these things and the anxieties and even the nuances of an abusive relationship, because it was totally emotionally abusive. And it's something that I feel like when you are outside of the situation, if you have, like, a friend that's going through that, and you're like, oh my gosh, why are you putting up with that? Why do you keep doing it? She just did a really good job of showing how the person that is enduring that, why it kind of makes sense that they go through that and they continue to seek it out.
And because, like, every time, there's obviously lots of spoilers, guys, because we're doing a book club book. So keep that in mind. But every time, like, Rye would tell her something, it sounded so believable. Like, we had no reason to doubt him. So that's from Frankie's point of view. She also had no reason to doubt him. And she was, like, in love with him. And it just shows you how easy it is to be gaslit whenever you trust the person.
Yes.
And whenever, like, there's just, she had no reason. And it makes me so sad. Yeah. And that happens all the time.
Yeah. Well, and when you have history with somebody that's so, like, crucial to your identity, like, going to the Vietnam War.
Crucial to her identity.
Yeah.
Well, yeah.
Like, going to Vietnam, I know a couple girls said this in our book club, but that was where she began her nursing journey, really. I mean, she had gone to nursing school and kind of been
in like night class.
Yeah, for a second she had some night shifts where she just like changed bedpans and stuff like that. But when she went to Vietnam, that was kind of where she found her career purpose and who she was, and nursing was such a core part of her throughout the book that it was also, she formed that identity with Rye also. Yeah. You know, and
lived through awful things with him where he was like the only comfort for her.
Yeah.
And I like that you said the core identity part, because I think that gives a lot of grace to the character and like other people who are in her situations.
Because you were kind of frustrated with her, weren't you?
Oh, yes. I get so frustrated in books though, because I am like, I don't even realize it through my everyday life until I'm reading books, but I'm like a huge feminist. I want the woman to be able to succeed on her own. I want her to like open her fucking eyes. I'm like, you're being an idiot. But then I'm like, I know I've been equally duped as many times. Or like, I know I don't make the best decisions. And in a book where I'm like, like you literally are writing the story, you could write it anyway. That's when I get frustrated. Because I remember saying like, I learned throughout this book I have zero empathy, because I was just like, what a fucking dumbass. You say you're going to stop taking the pills, but you're not, and blah, blah, blah. But I know multiple people like that in real life who I don't feel like that towards at all. Yeah. You know what I mean? Where I'm like, I know how addiction works, and I blah, blah, blah. But in a book, I can be very harsh.
I still feel like this book was written very much in a feminist perspective.
I think so, too.
I think the whole point was, I think that feminism can also be broadening your perspective to women who are maybe not exuding feminist ideals or whatever. Yeah. But
I just want every woman to be a strong ass woman. And so when they're not, because I mean, like you can't live up to that every day, and I know that in real life, but when it's a book, I'm like, or like a TV show, I get so mad. Right. Because I just want them to be stronger, and I want them to be smarter, and I'm like, all these men are outsmarting you, and you look like stupid. Yeah. And so that's when I get frustrated. And that's a problem I have to deal with on my own.
Yeah, I don't know. I just didn't, I didn't see it that way. Also, because we talked about this a little bit in book club, but the way that she got out of a lot of her issues that she ran into, like, honestly, this character spiraled so much. Yeah. And it was one thing after the other. It was work, it was family, it was her relationships, it was pills, everything. It was
alcohol.
Oh, yeah, addiction. It was everything you could think of. But so much of the way that she got out of that had to do with her girlfriends and the support there.
Yeah, I did love that.
And so I feel like that also was kind of showing that, I mean, you can be progressive and you can be for women and strong women, but also women are not going to be strong at all times. So then it's important to have other strong women around you that can help lift you up and bring you back.
Yeah, I definitely think so. I did. I was getting so frustrated with the parents.
Yeah.
And I did think that they did a good job. At one point, the mom says, like, well, your generation was raised differently than our generation. We were told, like, there was no outward love, and we also don't talk about things. All your generation does is talk about things. Right. And I thought that was funny, and I thought that did a good job of being, like, her parents aren't just heartless and cold. Like, they just are completely different. And so I did like that, because I felt like it gave grace to the parents. But I just felt so bad for Frankie constantly. Yeah. When I was like, you can tell behind closed doors her mom loves her and is proud of her and, like, not ashamed of her. But in the open, she is. And all that to say that I was recently reading this other book called The Fury. Okay. And in that book, he like, breaks the fourth wall or whatever. And he's like, I have to ask you this. Do you think that your fears from your childhood, like, carry on with you the rest of the time? And then it goes on to say, like, my therapist one time told me that every time I act out of fear or that my my main wants and needs come from the child locked inside. And when I read that, I was like, that's dramatic. Like, that's just for the story. But then we were reading the women, and she just wanted to be acknowledged, and she wanted to be, like, told she was proud of because her dad had that whole hero wall. Yeah, and I was like, that's crazy because that's going to live with her forever. Because even at the end, when she starts her own compound, she, like, starts her own hero wall.
Yeah.
And so then I don't know, that just, like, opened eyes for me that I was like, wow, we really do. You form an identity in your childhood that you keep with you forever, which I think is such a bummer.
Yeah, it is, but I wonder if she were more aware of that, I guess, maybe she would have been able to tackle things easier sooner. I don't know. So maybe there's something to be said for figuring out what that is for you and
what's the child trapped inside look like? What does it need?
Yeah, really. Yeah. And what more than anything is it seeking? Is it seeking validation and praise and pride the way that, Frankie was seeking it? Or I'm sure that stupid freaking Rye had some sort of little kid in him that was like, oh, I just need to be loved. Yeah. Or, I'm sure that, what was the character, her really good friend? Barb. Okay, yeah, Barb. She had a whole thing, I think, like, with her brother and her, like, relationship there. And I'm sure that she felt like, more than anything, a need to protect.
Oh, yeah, and, I would get that, too.
I bet her inner child felt, like, very defensive and protective and that sort of thing. So I'm sure that, I don't know, being able to figure that out and being like, okay, when am I acting out of that habit or that, like, innate thing, and is it helping me or hurting me at this point, and what could I do differently?
Yeah, definitely. I have to ask, how did you feel about her starting, like, her own little Serenity home, and like, what were your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I thought it was precious because I felt like she was, you always hear, like, be the change you want to see in the world. And she went to so many different places to try to get help, and they turned her away because women weren't in Vietnam, which pissed me off every time. I was like, you know what? I bet there's some old geezer that's still living that if you told him that, he'd be like, women weren't being. Yeah, and it's like, oh my gosh, the only reason that you're here
is because of the women in Vietnam.
Yeah. And if you didn't experience a woman in Vietnam, it's because you were never close to death. And so anyway, but yeah, so I loved it because I felt like she was providing something to the world that didn't exist before. And I felt like it gave her a different purpose. Like, she was so dependent on the nursing, and it gave her a different purpose that I felt like kind of got her out of. It was still something that was in her element, but it was like, it was out
still
of
caregiving, and it was still nurturing, but in a different way,
and safer for her, honestly. What'd you think of it?
I liked it. I think that at the very beginning, and again, guys, I'm like a harsh reader, I don't know why, but I think whenever the story isn't written exactly how I want it to be, I'm like, ugh, dumb. But I did like it. Towards the end, I did like it. I still felt bad for her, though, and I still felt like she was doing it for other people, even though I think she started it for herself, and I think that if Frankie was a real character, she would say she did it for herself, but she still had the instinct at one point to say, well, I'm alone, even though she was surrounded by so many people. And I just remember it was that part because I think Barb found herself a husband or whatever and was like, oh, you should come hang out with us. And she was like, no, I don't want to. Like, I'm alone. I don't have anybody. And she was like, but I didn't say that. Instead, I just said I'd like to go off by myself, blah, blah, blah. So I still felt bad for her. And I still felt like she didn't get the life that she wanted. And she just got the life that she had.
I mean, I think the point of that, though, wasn't like she was cynical, like, I'm alone and you're not, so I'm going to go on my own. It was more like, the way I read it was that she was more like, well, I've been so dependent on other people for so long at this point, like her parents and even Rye and Barb and Ethel. Wait. Yeah. I don't know why, but all of a sudden that sounded like an old, like, band's name that I'm...
Barb and Ethel?
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, but, like, she was so dependent on all of them for her happiness that she was like, I need to go figure out what happiness looks like without those people because because she had never had that, honestly. And she, even with, wait, was Rye the one that grew up in her town? and was her brother's friend. Okay, yeah.
Yes.
So, like, even before she met him with her brother's thing, like, even then she was seeking to be heroic and whatever. And so her happiness was always dependent on what other people's view of her was and her relationship with them. And same with nursing. That's why she hung on to it so long, because she was like, I can help people. But to me, it felt like she was going off on her own more, because she was like, I have never known what happiness is like by myself.
So you felt like towards the end, it was kind of left with an open ending, that she was going to go find her happiness and figure out who she wanted to be, and kind of like that?
Yeah. Well, wasn't the ending of her Serenity home, though?
Yeah.
Wasn't it like she went off, she found a place that seemed good, and then she built that, right?
Yes. But then I think she does the I'm alone thing whenever they go to the ceremony of the like museum opening or whatever.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Ethel and Barb go off with their kids and their family, and she's like, well, I'm alone. And then it's literally one tiny little sentence. It's like, but I feel like that one stuck out to me.
Yeah, I was going to say, it must not have stuck with me as much as
it stuck with me.
Because doesn't she right after see Jamie?
Yes. Yes. I think she sees her parents first.
Oh, yes.
Who come.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I
just got
that. You did?
Oh, my gosh. All over my body. That made me... It gave me, like... It just was so much validation for her. Talk about, like, your inner child or whatever.
Yeah, they finally showed up for her. And we're proud of her. I loved that, too. I loved that the mom was holding the picture of Finn. And said he would want us to be here. And she said, I want to see his name. I loved that.
Yeah.
And I thought that was a great way to, like, honor his memory and show that the parents were changing. And I thought that was beautiful. And then she sees Jamie.
Yeah.
Which I also loved.
Oh, I loved that so much.
I felt like that was a part that some people didn't love, because they were like, oh my God, like we had 2 people come back from the dead.
I don't care.
I mean,
bring them all back.
Bring them all back. No, it's funny because I was telling you this, but I did a lot of research afterwards, because I can get really hyper-focused on like hobbies and interests. And I found out that actually happened a lot because of people that were imprisoned, or all of the death count numbers were being totally skewed.
Yeah, because the freaking U.S. was lying all the time, so they couldn't be like, oh, they couldn't report someone. Well, wait, opposite. They couldn't report, I don't know.
No, they just were saying that not that many people were dead. Yeah. And like that, they were never reporting missing numbers until journalists started going down in there. And then that's when it all,
that's crazy,
like actually started coming out.
Yeah.
I know.
So wild.
Crazy. I think, that was just it feels weird to say it was such a fun book, but like it was really just a book that you learned so much.
Yeah, and just great conversation, because it hits so much. I mean, it hits racism, it hits war, it hits PTSD, it hits
sexism.
Yeah. Oh, it's so much sexism.
Obvious.
It's called The Women.
The Women.
Yeah. It just hits weird family dynamics. I mean, just all sorts of addiction, like everything.
Like class.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, definitely. Yeah. Definitely class. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was just so fascinating. Even like health, it was just so fascinating. And I loved it so much. It was a really highly rated book.
It
for
was.
Our book club as well. I think the average was like 4 to 5, honestly.
Yeah, I think everybody but 2 people, because it was me and Lindsay, were the only ones that gave it like a 4, but we were both like, oh, we'd round up to a 4.5.
Yeah.
And it was just because for us it got like a little bit slower towards the end.
Yeah.
And that was really it. Maybe Alexandra gave it a 4.
Gave it a 4
because she said the beginning was slow for her.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, it was totally opposite for me and Lindsay.
Yeah.
But, yeah, otherwise it was 5s, which, guys, that's amazing because normally you get, like, 1 5 on a book.
Yeah, usually in book club, we'll have mostly between
like
2 and 4.
Oh, yeah.
Like 2.5, 3, 4, and then we'll have, like, maybe 1 5 and maybe a 1. Rarely ever a 1. But it's definitely mostly, like, those middle numbers, 3, 3.5.
With people being like, yeah, it was fine. I liked reading it. But, no, this one...
so good.
Yeah, this one really.
And I would recommend any of the other Kristen I've read Nightingale, and I always forget if it's I think it's The Great Alone is the one about the Dust Bowl. And I've said this in book club, but I was like, I have never been so interested in the Dust Bowl before reading this book. Like, it always seems so boring, and then you read this book, and she just takes you on such a journey. It's so emotional, so good.
Yeah, which one would you recommend of hers the most, do you think?
The Nightingale, for sure.
The Nightingale.
I mean, The Women was so great, but The Nightingale, I just think
Is that one about the two sisters in the War?
Yes, so
War II?
it's two sisters, and they have very different paths during, when like Hitler is reigning, and it takes place in Paris, so it's not specifically in Germany or, so it's
different setting.
Yeah, but it just does such a good job of showing how slowly but surely things were like taking place that were kind of taking over, and it's just done so well. And one of the sisters is more progressive, like fighting the war, and one of the sisters is more experiencing it from home.
I love dual point of view books.
Yeah,
Ooh, I'll have to read that one.
I love it.
Yeah.
It is like, I think it is a 550 pager or something like that.
Damn. Yeah. No, but I mean, I think after reading The Women, I was like, no, it's definitely worth it. Like, definitely. And I read that book faster than I would read it like a 300-page book.
Right.
So, because it was so...
I think I read it in a few days.
Good. Yeah. This will be like one of the last things I say before we jump into what we're reading next month.
Yeah.
But we talked about at book club, like, the readability of Kristen Hanna, that her books are large and she does cover deep, important subjects, but she writes in a way where you're not struggling to figure out what she's saying. You don't need a dictionary.
Which is uncommon.
Yeah, I feel like it's super uncommon with big books like that covering deep subjects.
Yeah.
So her readability is perfect.
Agreed.
And I really like that. Well, did you have anything else to add for the women?
No, let's go ahead. We're moving on to September, right?
Yes, we're doing our September book club, and we still want you guys to join along and read with us. This month's book club choice is from our own Lindsay, and she chose the book Recursion by Blake Crouch. And that's like a sci-fi, I think.
Oh, interesting.
Which is like our first sci-fi.
Oh, we haven't done any sci-fi.
No.
That's exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the description actually is really, really cool. It's just a long description, so I don't want to, like, get into it. But have you seen Black Mirror before?
Yeah.
Have you seen the episode where they can play memories in their mind back? And, like, I just remember
I don't think I have, but I think Jared's told me about that one. He kind of like screens the episodes for me because stuff like that sticks in my brain so much and I get scared. But so sometimes he's like, you would like this episode, and then other times he's like, you should probably never watch this episode.
Oh yeah. Well, the mind one, if you guys have seen that one, you guys can or you can watch like memories in your mind. And I just remember there's this one scene in that episode where it's a husband and wife and they're having sex, but they're both in their own memories, and they're both thinking about, I think she's thinking about another man.
Ew,
and I think he's thinking about a time like 7 years ago when they were having sex, and it was like really good. So it's like they're not in the moment because they're just replaying the memories. And I think that's what this book's about.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's kind of got
it's gonna be trippy
aspect. I think it's gonna be. I'm actually really excited for it, but kind of nervous for the technical aspect of it.
Yeah.
So we'll see how it goes.
It'll be fun.
But me too. Yeah. So read along with us, guys. I think we've decided September 7th.
4th.
Okay, September 4th is our book club date, so that means we'll probably have it out a couple days after that. And we'd love for you guys to read along with us.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thanks for tuning in to our book club episode. Cheers.
Cheers.